Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for our June community meeting. Getting started with a quick agenda. We have two really awesome community presentations today. We're going to hear first from Seth on Mojo and bioinformatics, and then we're going to hear from Photon on accelerating particle physics with Mojo. We're then going to talk about our upcoming Modular Hack Weekend and share some exciting updates there, and then we will do some Q&A. So I'm going to hand it over to Seth.
So my name is Seth Static. I am duct tape on all the forums and Discord. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Mojo in bioinformatics, specifically a tool that I've been working on called ISH, which is used for high performance index-free alignment with SIMD and, of course, GPU. ISH is intended to be a grep-like tool, but instead of using exact matching or pattern matching like grep does with regexes, it uses optimal alignment scores as its match criteria. I wanted to work in at least a little bit of code. There'll be some more later, not as much as I'd like, but this on the left-hand side is one of the core inner loops of some of the alignment algorithms. We'll touch on a little bit more later. So what is optimal alignment and how is that different than exact matching? What's on the right here is a dynamic programming matrix for aligning two strings against each other. And the goal of this exercise is to find the optimal path using a scoring mechanism of some sort to find the best substring match between the two. It varies a little bit by alignment, and I'm kind of glossing over some details, but we can also look at this small example on the bottom here, where I have my query string, which is database connection failed, and the log line that I might be searching for, which had connection misspelled. So there's a deletion accounted for there and a mismatch with the lowercase d and capital D, for example. So I keep saying optimal, and optimal in this case means that this algorithm will always find the best scoring path on this dynamic programming matrix. There are non-optimal alignment algorithms as well, which make some trade-offs for speed, but may miss things here and there. ISH does not include those at the moment. It would be great at some future point if we do, but for the moment, it only includes optimal alignment algorithms. You're going to see this come up a little bit later. Gigacell updates per second, or GCUPs. This is kind of the standard metric for measuring how fast alignment algorithms are performing, and it indicates how quickly we're updating this dynamic programming matrix and how many cells we can update per second. So as I alluded to earlier, ISH is a CLI filtering tool. It can read from standard input or input files. You specify a query. It will then filter the input data based on that query and trying to only letting records through that exceed a certain match score that you can specify. So this is record type aware, which is important for bioinformatics because we're not always dealing with byline files. A lot of our record types are multi-line, such as FASTA and FASTQ. So this tool is record type aware, and that you can specify that you're inputting a FASTA or FASTQ file, and it will be able to parse that appropriately and align against the full sequence from that record type. But we also do support individual line records as well, so you can use this similar to grep. For non-bioinformatics people, what might the use case be here? You could use it for searching a log, like I showed in the first slide there. It is useful if you want to do something a little bit closer to a semantic search first. So kind of a first pass filter of, I kind of know what I want to search for. This might be a good way to find the lines that match what you're looking for. And then you could further refine with an actual regular expression from there. Why Mojo? I mean, this is the modular community meeting, so of course that's the main reason. But I wanted to prove out that Mojo worked nicely for an entire bioinformatics application, not just on small micro benchmarks. And I really wanted to try out the SIMD abstractions that Mojo had in place. That was the initial goal here, because the alignment algorithms that we're going to be looking at, the best possible versions of them are a striped SIMD version, which is what I wanted to try and implement. While I was doing that is when Mojo open sourced a bunch of the GPU code, so I ended up adding a GPU version as well, which we're going to talk about. For measuring performance, I tried to do it on 2 different levels. Like I mentioned, this was to test building an entire application for bioinformatics. So there is some performance benchmarking at the application level, just the actual binary. But then I was also able to benchmark the core alignment algorithms themselves because there are reference implementations of this out there. And that's a much more apples to apples comparison. For the whole application performance, the closest tool that I could find to benchmark against is agrep. Agrep is a mismatch aware regex engine built from the TRE library. Agrep is not multi-threaded, it's only single-threaded. And the way it works is you can specify a certain number of mismatches that are allowed in your regular expression. And you can also give it scores to use for matches, mismatches, deletions, and insertions, which is similar to what a regular alignment algorithm might do. To test against that, I took the allowed number of mismatches, in this case 12, for a query length of 50, and had an equivalent score to use for ish. So the most apples to apples comparison is ish running in single-threaded mode compared to agrep, which is 3x faster. And then when ish is actually allowed to, go fast and use all the resources available to it, it's 75x faster, which is cool, but also like this isn't an apples to apples comparison. It's not really fair to, beat on this tool that came out 20 plus years ago. So to look at something a little bit closer, this is comparing the core alignment algorithm in ish against the C++ reference implementation that I was basing it off of, which is called Parasail. Parasail is a library of alignment algorithms, and they have a benchmark utility that they've built, just a little command line benchmark utility that does all the data prep and then launches the alignments and times the alignments and generates your GCUP score. So I reproduced that benchmark utility in Mojo so that I could get something a little bit closer to a fair comparison. As you can see in the table below, I would be confident in saying that the ish core algorithm for local alignment, for example, is as fast as the C++ version. I'm not going to go crazy saying that it's faster just yet because apples to apples comparisons are really hard, but we'll get something more exciting here in a second. One exciting bit is this red line at the top. So in these plots, the solid lines are ish, the dashed lines are Parasail. The x-axis is the query length, and the y-axis is the GCUPs, or speed. So the exciting part here is the solid red line, which is ish using AVX 512 instructions, which the C++ implementation does not support because those were not well supported when it originally came out, and it hasn't been updated in a while. The cool part here is that since I'm using just Mojo's higher level SIMD abstractions, I get that for free just by specifying the SIMD width, which was pretty neat. In the bottom one here, so top one is x64, bottom is AArch64. We're going to come back to this exciting green line in just a second here. But overall, ish performed well compared to Parasail. For semi-global alignments, which is just a slightly different variation, ish is convincingly faster, like 16 to 35% faster is very much in the, we can say it's faster category. Why is it faster? It's because it's not as one-to-one for the algorithm. The standard implementation for semi-global alignment uses signed integers, but I was able to switch that to using unsigned integers, mostly because I wanted to make use of known underflow behavior and get rid of a couple checks, which did add up to some performance improvements. Again, I would kind of attribute that to Mojo's higher level abstraction, making it a lot easier to experiment with the algorithm, as opposed to the C, C++, Rust implementations where you're actually writing SIMD intrinsics, and the cost of changing something is a lot higher and a lot harder. So coming back to that green line from before, this is once again getting back to Mojo and its high-level SIMD abstraction. That is what I believe is called SIMD strip mining. So taking the hardware SIMD width and multiplying it by some factor. In this case, I was multiplying it by 2. So the green line there is on AART64, which the standard hardware width on what I was using for U8s, for example, was 16. The green line is using 32 wide vectors instead, and it goes faster on long queries. The Mojo code that I have here is just a little toy example that takes a vector and adds 1 to every element that is odd. The assembly on the left is when you use just the regular hardware width. The assembly on the right is when you double the hardware width, which is not terribly exciting in this small example because it's just doubling the SIMD instructions for the most part. This gets way more exciting when you have interlane dependencies or large reductions going on, and the compiler is able to do a lot more work for you that would be pretty onerous to do if you were writing the intrinsics manually. GPU performance. So for the GPU implementation, all I did, because this is the first time that I had written any GPU code, so I was quite pleased to get it working at all. All I did was take a scalar implementation of the semi-global alignment method and stick it in a GPU kernel, which worked surprisingly well, just to try and make use of all the threads on a GPU. The graph here that we're looking at is showing the different query lengths. So this is bin to 0 to 200, 200 to 400, etc. And then the different colors are multiple GPUs being used. So blue is 1, green is 2, 3, 4, etc. And then average GCUPs. With one GPU, we're hitting around 40 GCUPs. And if we go back real quick to take a look at this, for example, I mean, let's look at it up here. So we're in somewhere in this vicinity. We're in like the 2 or 3 GCUPs range on a single CPU. I don't have a slide showing it, but the scaling factor that I was getting on a CPU by throwing more cores at it was roughly half. So if I threw 24 more cores, that gets me around the same performance as one GPU in this case. This is not cutting edge for performance for GPU-based alignment performance, but it is comparable to the performance that was common a year or two ago. This is very comparable to a tool called Adept. CUDA SW4 is the current best-in-class GPU-based alignment method that is very specific to doing searches on protein databases. And to put it in perspective, CUDA SW4 measures things in teacups instead of G-cups. So it's a whole order of magnitude faster, and they get to say teacups. So hopefully get to work on that a little bit more for Ish. But overall, I was blown away by the effort to performance ratio that I was able to get by porting this in Mojo. Another thing that was very cool about doing this all in Mojo was the metaprogramming and the ability to choose the fast path with whatever it was we happen to be doing. So in this particular example, I'm choosing a max target length because when putting things on the GPU, since I'm running an alignment per thread, it's very important that no single thread is doing substantially more work than any of the other threads around it. So I don't want any one warp to get bogged down because one alignment was length 3000 and all the others were length 100. To account for that, I peek ahead at the incoming data and build up some statistics about it and set a max target length based on the expected mean incoming length, and then right size that to some power of 2. So I've peeked ahead, and now with this loop, I'm trying to choose which of these power of 2 max target lengths I'm going to use for generating the GPU buffers and launching the kernel. The cool part is the at parameter for loop that I can use here and generate the if chain necessary to select the correct right sizing. This is just one example. There were a few more because, for example, the query length is also a parameter and not an argument here. So I'm doing that at the very beginning or launch of everything is picking the right size query. So that was really interesting to be able to push as much of this into compile time as possible. The compiler and my CPU didn't love that quite as much when I'm generating, every possible combination of code paths going through things. But it was fun to try. So in conclusion, Mojo for bioinformatics is in a great state even right now. Mojo's not 1.0, obviously, but it looks very promising for bioinformatics. The fact that I was able to publish this all with Rattler and Pixie, so it's all available on Conda right now, is really cool and works very well with regular bioinformaticians workflows out there because they're all installing most things from Conda. The continued work with Python bindings, I think, will be huge for bioinformatics as well because not everybody is going to be writing Mojo. I want to go back and provide Python bindings to a lot of the library related code for ish here. The only downsides that I found was the concurrency model. So this is specifically the CPU concurrency model. Being able to have threads and be able to launch work, have a thread that's keying up work for the GPU asynchronous of the main thread would help a lot. Everything at the moment is very chunky. I read data, build up big arrays, and then process it with parallelize or send it all to the GPU and then wait for things to come back. So having a more worked concurrency model will help there. And then obviously hitting 1.0 and an open source compiler, which I know are all coming, but I had to mention them as things that I want before I think this is really going to take off. So with that, thank you guys all for listening. Any questions on any of that? I have more pictures that I can show if you have questions.
That was awesome, Seth. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
There are a couple of questions in the chat. So Todd had a question. If you were going to characterize your experience with Mojo, how much time did it take compared to a C++ implementation? How much easier to learn for new students?
Yeah. Well, unfair question for me because I don't know C++. I only know Rust. That's where I'm coming from and the background there. So how long would it take me to implement in Rust versus this? I don't have any firm numbers on that other than kind of a hand wavy answer, which is I think it was faster in Mojo, just because I didn't have to get into the weeds of writing the actual SIMD intrinsics. If I weren't in the weeds with the SIMD stuff, I probably would have been faster implementing it in Rust. But being able to abstract over all of that, where I don't have a whole lot of domain knowledge with SIMD intrinsics, was big for me going kind of fast in developing this. I'm looking too at the questions.
I think there's also a question from Owen. Do you want a CPU thread for I/O or do you want GPU direct I/O so the GPU can just read from the drive directly?
Both or either, and or Owen, you can tell me. The natural way that I wanted to do it was to have a thread for I/O, to have one thread that was doing I/O and queuing up the data, and then shipping that off to other threads because that's how I think I would have done it in Rust most likely. Would be to set up a thread and then send everything around with channels is kind of the way that I'm used to working. I did try to set up a little like double buffer scenario with the stuff that is in the async runtime library module and standard lib right now, which it kind of worked, but I didn't spend that much more time on it to really get it working before putting together all these results. So I do want to keep playing with it a little bit more. Rust is easier than C++. I agree. Yeah.
There is also a question from Mohammed. How similar is the API for GPU versus CPU alignment for the user? Was metaprogramming helpful in unifying them?
For the user, it's transparent. Like they don't have to see anything, which is really cool. You can kind of gloss over everything with a nice API, especially because the GPU side of things is so portable. That was something I didn't really expect when setting this all up to publish it on Conda. I had the, in retrospect, obvious realization that not everybody is going to have the same SIMD capabilities on all of their computers, and with Conda, I have to precompile things. So I guess I needed to set some lower bound. But with the GPU, there was nothing to do because it's all JIT compiled, at when it's needed. So whatever hardware the user has just works. So from the command line, the user doesn't have to specify anything. I do have an option for specifying how many GPUs you want to use, which feels pretty cool to be able to put that as a command line argument. But from a library perspective, you could make it transparent, I think.
Thank you.
Um,
Sora asked, how was your experience writing generic SIMD code in Mojo? What could be improved?
yeah, the experience was not too bad, and and also Sora did help me with some things along the way, so so it didn't feel too bad with that help for sure. Um, the only pain point was again that like the last bit at the very end, which is a pain point in all languages, which is packaging up your binary to ship to all the other computers, and being able to detect SIMD capabilities at runtime would be awesome. And anyone here can maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe we can do that at the moment, at least not in a straightforward way with stuff that's in the standard library. So tackling that would be, I think, pretty beneficial if it's possible, because again, that's the thing that a lot of other languages don't have any solution for. Um, it just odd that not odd. It's cool that the GPU portability is so high that it made me want to complain about the CPU portability.
Awesome. Any other questions for Seth? Going once, going twice. All right, well, let's give a virtual round of applause. Thank you so much, Seth.
Thanks.
I just have one comment to one of the points you made, Seth. It's good feedback for the runtime detection of SIMD capabilities and other things like that. We actually have a little C++ tool internally that we ship, which is called System Info, which is like part of things that people file for bug reports and such on GitHub issues. I think that we could take some of the data from that and propagate it through forward in Mojo. Either rewrite it in Mojo, but at the end of the day, it's just using feature flags and feature detection from LLVM, which you'd have access to. So let's definitely chat more about that offline.
Yeah, awesome.
Thank you, Joe. Now I'm going to hand it over to Photon, who's going to talk about accelerating particle physics with Mojo.
So, I'm Shiv Shankar, but I go by the alias Photon in the Discord. So I'll be talking about accelerating particle physics with Mojo. So roughly, I'll just give a brief introduction and talk about where exactly we use where exactly Mojo comes in the picture of particle physics, and what's the state of computing in particle physics right now, and yeah, basically how Mojo helps that. And I'll talk about two of the libraries that I'm working on. One is newmojo, and the other is hepjo. And finally, I'll talk a little bit about my experience with Mojo in one of my research projects. my talk won't be a lot too technical. It's more concentrated on how Mojo is how Mojo can be useful in particle physics. All right, so first, who I am and why I care about Mojo. Well, I've been a long-time lurker in the Discord, so I finally decided to come out of the shadows. I'm a PhD student working in theoretical particle physics and astrophysics primarily, but recently I'm also studying connections between that and deep learning. So since I'm in theoretical side, I do a lot of simulations, mainly in Python and C++, which probably could be made faster. So that's kind of how I found about Mojo. So I was down the rabbit hole of trying to speed up some codes, and that's where I came across Mojo. So before I dive into talking about what exactly Mojo is doing, I have to give you some background on what exactly we do with computing in particle physics. So I'll just give a brief example. This machine that you see is called the Large Hadron Collider. It's pretty much the biggest machines we as a species have built. It's located in Europe. It's like a 27-kilometer ring, and we just smash subatomic particles and we study them. Now, the raw data from this machine is roughly expected to be around 40,000 billion gigabytes of raw data. That's a huge number, but in practice, most of it is filtered and trimmed and squeezed into something we can handle. But you get the idea that the computing needed to analyze such data is it's huge. It's on a different scale, and this is just one experiment among many. So yeah, that just gives you a rough idea of the amount of computing that we require in particle physics. So where does code meets the particles? So computing in particle physics comes in two flavors, theory and experiment. I personally live on the theory side. We basically write models with pen and paper, use coding to compute real life observables, do some simulations. So mostly I just fire up Python and C++ to do that. On the experimental side, you're already kind of drowning in data. You have to filter it, do reconstruction, compare it to theory, and of course, visualize it. Now, also, another way Mojo could actually enter particle physics is there's been a huge surge in use of machine learning models and a lot of experiments in recent times. So yeah, that's one way Mojo can meet particles. Now, as physicists, what do we actually want from programming tools? This is completely different from a software engineer perspective. Well, I mean, there are some similarities. First of all, simplicity. Most of the particle physicists aren't really trained software engineers. So we need simple, readable, and writable codes, which doesn't require 10 build flags and should be easy to learn. And because, well, most of the particle physicists personally are kind of lazy. Second, we need fast prototyping. We are trying to spend most of the time coming up with physics ideas rather than spend time on coding. So we are trying, we want to be able to write codes quickly and just get done with it quickly. So I think that's one of the reasons why Python has been really successful in particle physics. It's quick to write, it's quick to visualize. And third is reusability and reproducibility. So it's one of the cornerstones of science, so we need to be able to reproduce the results from some papers. So yeah, we need fewer dependency nightmares and just more copy paste that just works out of the box. But unfortunately, that's not really the current state right now. So why it all matters? First, particle physics doesn't just push the boundaries of universe, but it also stress tests software and hardware, given the huge amount of computing that's needed. And a lot of these workflows are complex and contains a lot of legacy codes and cryptic bindings. So we end up spending a lot more time just debugging build issues and just trying to glue together a lot of languages to just make it work. So I think the field really needs a better modern tools, and that's where I think Mojo comes in. So I'll talk about the state of computing right now. Now, in HEP specifically, there's a lot of Python. Python is everywhere, and C++ is pretty much powers almost all the core of the frameworks. And there's also Fortran. It's kind of like the radioactive waste. You just don't want to touch it, but it's still there. And so we just have this huge mess of languages which people write different frameworks and different codes. So we kind of end up being a polyglot by necessity, not by choice, and it's not really a good thing for productivity, which means the next problem is inevitable, which is optimization. Now, Python is great. Like I said, it's quick to prototype and stuff, but it's great for writing logic, but it's not so great for making that logic not take 6 hours. But that's where C++ comes in. But when we want to actually write a lot of simulations and stuff, things kind of get messy where we have to write a lot of Python bindings for bindings for C++ to run it from Python and so on. So it's just a lot of layers where you have to glue everything just to make it work. And finally, usability. So all of this complexity is just it just takes time to work with, and there's just so much legacy code in particle physics, especially. And well, it's also difficult to reproduce. So it's a matter of whether you want something fast or something that's readable and easy to work with, and rarely both. And I think that's where Mojo exactly fits in. It's the perfect optimum, I think. So it's a that brings me to the question of what if we could have it all? So we can have performant codes. If we could write performant codes that like C++, but with the simplicity of Pythonic syntax, and have a unified stack for pretty much all the processes that we do in particle physics, from theory to experiments, so that we don't have to write so many wrappers and fiddling around with bindings. And that was the dream, and I think that's it's the first time I've seen a language, especially Mojo, where I think it's possible. So that brings me to newmojo and hepjo. So these are two open source libraries. You can find the links to GitHub in the Modular Discord. So newmojo is basically trying to be a high performance alternative to NumPy in pure Mojo. If you haven't already, please check out the talk that Alex, who's working with us in the newmojo project, he gave a talk on newmojo on an earlier modular meeting. I think it's up on the YouTube channel. Now, the part that I'm working on, the other library I'm working on is hepjo. So I was trying to put one of my Python plus C++ code base for one of my research projects where we do some simulations to Mojo. I think it's a fun way to learn Mojo, so I was trying to port it, but I had to write a lot of these highly physics specific tools, like lots of vectors and array manipulations, histograms, and a lot of particle metadata, and then some statistics and fitting functions. Now, hepjo, the officially available version, has the vector module alone, which is pretty stable, and I'm kind of working on the other statistics module right now, and hopefully when I get time, I will try to update it. But yeah, that's enough theory. I'll talk about my experience with the actual research project that I did. So what I was trying to, so the basic idea is that we're trying to simulate the particles at the machine that I talked about earlier, the LHC. And once these particles are produced, we propagate them and we study their decays at some detector. So that's the whole pipeline. So what I ported are these 4 sets of modules. So first is the event generation, which basically is it's one of the heavy parts of the code, which where we do a lot of particle physics modeling, and we use Monte Carlo simulations to produce these particles. So once these are produced, then we basically decay these particles and study only the particles which reach the detector. And the other part, which is computing heavy, is the detector simulation, where we do a lot of things like magnetic field, how the magnetic field affect the particles, and so on. So, and then of course, finally, visualization and like reconstructing these things. So these are some of the modules that I ported from my C++ Python code base to a pure Mojo code base. So I didn't really do a lot of specific testing, so this is just a rough experience. So working with a MacBook M2. So one of the things that I really enjoyed about Mojo is basically one of the things that I really want is being able to write codes pretty fast, because it's very similar to, it's a more Pythonic language, so it's easy to read and write and just get started with, I think. And also the incremental ways in which you can speed up your codes with SIMD and parallelization and so on. So yeah, it took me around 2 weeks with a lot of help from Kappa and this Mojo docs. Now, unfortunately, I can't really share the code yet since my paper is in review, but I'll be happy to drop the GitHub repo once the paper is out. And I'll be happy if someone could go through it and suggest any more optimizations. So yeah, I saw a rough 3x speed up throughout this whole pipeline that I talked about, from event generation, decaying, simulations, and visualizations. So yeah, I think Mojo worked out pretty great for the porting, and not just on the runtime side, but also on just the more productive developer experience. So to me, as a physicist, being able to write such performant codes quickly is definitely the best selling point of Mojo. So I could spend more time on doing research than just debugging the build process. Now, it's of course not all magic, also RIP to magic, but we're slowly getting there. Some of the limitations and improvements. One of the biggest problems I had was the I/O, especially to a lot of different data formats that particle physics people use. I'm not so honestly, I/O is not really my strong suit, so I'm not sure if maybe a better way, there are better ways to do it, but I felt like the I/O is still not that mature in Mojo yet. So I'm I was calling out to Python a lot. It worked, but I don't know how much performance was lost in that handoff. But perhaps once I drop the link, maybe someone could go through it and suggest some improvements. Now, yeah, and the next is lack of libraries, but this is totally fair. Mojo is still young on the grand scale of language developments. So it's either you just write it from scratch or just use the Python interrupt. Now, I was working on this last year at which point I think the Python interrupt to Mojo was not so easy, seamless. Although in the latest version is really, really good. And I think in the nightlies, we also have the option to call Mojo from Python, which I haven't tested yet. So yeah, I think the Python interrupt has got way better. The next problem is that Mojo has a lot of momentum in the AI space, but I feel like there is not so much enough momentum in the scientific community yet. But I think as a community, we could improve that definitely. Also, I hope we have GPU support for Mac so that I could tinker around. I don't have an NVIDIA lying around. So yeah, in short, the way I see it is Mojo is doing something that not just AI, but also the scientific computing and particle physics as badly needed. It's a way to go from fragmentation, having dozens of layers and languages and layers of glue to fusion to just have one unified language. So I think with Mojo, physicists could finally spend more time thinking about particles and not pointers. It's still early, but I think we're moving in the right direction, and I think the community is slowly building out a lot more tools. So I think we'll get there someday. So to end, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. I think the simplicity of Mojo is exactly what physicists need in this fractured over-engineered ecosystem. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Any questions
All
for
right.
John?
Do you have any questions?
Have you talked any colleagues into using Mojo yet? Or have they forbid you from talking about Mojo?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So I've been giving talks on my paper recently, and yeah, I've been trying my best to, promote Mojo too. And yeah, I have actually, peer pressured some of my colleagues into using Mojo, but I think they've been enjoying right now. So yeah, it is happening, but I feel like that a lot of people do not know about Mojo yet. They haven't even really heard about it, at least in the scientific side. Yeah.
Thank you. Really excited to see your paper. So, any other questions? If there are no other questions, let's give another little virtual round of applause. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Awesome. So now I'm going to take a moment just to talk about our upcoming hackathon. So if you saw our last hackathon and you were disappointed that you weren't able to attend, maybe you're not in the Bay Area, I have very exciting news for you, which is that this hackathon will be open to everyone globally. You'll be able to participate completely virtually. This hackathon will run over the weekend of June 28th. So we are calling it Modular Hack Weekend. And the main focus of this event is going to be building Mojo kernels, new max graph architectures, and PyTorch custom ops. We also have some really amazing partners for this event. NVIDIA is providing really awesome prizes. There's going to be a 5090 for first place, a 5080 for second place, and a 5070 for third place. Lambda is also providing free compute for all hackathon participants over the course of the weekend. And we're also partnering with the GPU mode community on this event. So you might be wondering, how does a virtual hackathon work? So this is just kind of a high level overview of the weekend. We'll kick it off on that Friday with a GPU programming workshop. We will also be hosting virtual office hour sessions over the course of the weekend. So if you get stuck, you have questions, you want to chat with some of our engineers over the course of the weekend, definitely attend those via Zoom. We'll also facilitate virtual team matching. So if you're looking for other folks who want to work on your project, we'll help you get connected with folks. And then finally on Sunday, there will be demos and judging that will take place via Zoom, and we will announce the final winners via a live stream. So the whole hackathon should wrap up around 6:30 p.m. Pacific time on Sunday. And then for the GPU programming workshop on Friday, if you are in the Bay Area, you're welcome to attend in person as well, but you can also attend virtually via live stream too. We are really looking forward to seeing hopefully a lot of you, whether it's virtual or in person, at this hackathon. Thank you so much again to our presenters, really awesome presentations today. We'll get the links to slides posted in the agenda doc as usual, and we will see you next month. Thank you.